In Episode 2, titled Scoring, Question Types, and Time Strategy for Data Plus D0-002, the focus turns from content knowledge to pacing decisions that quietly protect a score under pressure. The credential is issued by CompTIA, and the exam structure rewards candidates who can stay steady when time feels tight and questions vary in difficulty. A strong preparation plan includes technical understanding, but it also includes a practical plan for how attention and minutes get spent across the whole session. When pacing is treated as part of competence, performance tends to look more consistent because fewer points are lost to rushing, stalling, or stress. That is the tone for everything that follows, because timing is not a trick. It is part of what the exam environment is designed to measure. Scaled scoring is often described in a way that feels opaque, and that feeling can create unnecessary worry if it is misunderstood. A scaled score typically means raw performance is converted into a score range, so results remain comparable even when different versions of the exam vary slightly in difficulty. That conversion process can make it hard to interpret a single missed question because the outcome depends on how many items were answered correctly and how the exam form is balanced. The important point is that the scoring approach is not meant to punish candidates for one tough item, but to reflect overall performance across a blueprint of skills. When the scoring model is treated as a reason to aim for consistent, broad coverage instead of perfection, time and effort usually get spent in a smarter way. Question formats matter because each format demands a different kind of attention, even when the underlying skill is the same. Some items primarily test recognition, where the task is to select the best description, definition, or interpretation of a scenario using the information provided. Other items lean toward application, where a STEM describes a workplace situation and the task is to choose the approach that best fits constraints like data type, quality, stakeholder needs, or governance expectations. Some formats tend to increase cognitive load by requiring selection of more than one correct response or by embedding small details across the STEM and answer options. When formats are recognized quickly, mental energy can shift to reasoning rather than decoding what the item is asking the candidate to do. A time budget per item acts like a guardrail because it prevents a few difficult questions from consuming the minutes needed to secure easier points later. A practical budget is not a rigid stopwatch rule, but a general expectation of how long a typical item deserves before diminishing returns appear. The key idea is that the exam is designed so that every candidate faces a mix of faster and slower questions, and a score is often protected by keeping the mix balanced. When a candidate spends too long on early items, later items may receive rushed attention, which can create avoidable errors even on material that is understood. A time budget is really a decision policy, and decision policies tend to perform well when they are simple and consistently applied. A two-pass method supports that policy by separating point collection from problem solving that requires more time. In the first pass, attention stays on items that can be answered confidently with straightforward reasoning because those points are the least expensive in time. Items that feel ambiguous or time-heavy are noted and deferred, which reduces the emotional pull to wrestle with them immediately. This approach aligns with how experienced analysts work under deadlines, where deliverables are protected by completing the high-confidence work first and returning to unresolved questions with remaining capacity. The method also reduces panic because progress continues and the exam experience feels controlled rather than chaotic. Time sinks are best recognized early because the earlier they are identified, the less likely they are to disrupt the pacing plan. A time sink often looks like a STEM that is long, a scenario that includes multiple constraints, or an item that demands careful calculation or interpretation of details that are easy to misread. Another common signal is the internal feeling of looping, where the same few options are reread without moving closer to a decision, which usually means the item is not yielding value at the current moment. Calm forward motion protects the score, because a partially solved hard question is not worth more than a fully solved easy question, and the exam does not reward stubbornness. Professional judgment includes knowing when to defer a decision, and that same judgment can be applied here without drama. Elimination is one of the most reliable tools for narrowing choices, especially when a candidate is not fully certain but can recognize what does not fit. Many wrong options fail because they violate a constraint in the STEM, solve a different problem than the one asked, or rely on an assumption the STEM never granted. Eliminating these options reduces cognitive noise and increases the probability of choosing the best remaining answer, even when confidence is moderate. This matters because multiple choice design often includes distractors that sound technical but do not actually satisfy the STEM's intent. When elimination is applied consistently, guessing becomes less random and more like a reasoned selection among plausible survivors. Extreme words are a common signal that an option may be a distractor because they can overpromise certainty in situations that are usually conditional. Words like always, never, only, must, and guarantees can be correct in rare cases, but many real-world data decisions depend on context, data quality, and stakeholder requirements. A STEM that describes uncertainty or trade-offs rarely supports an answer that claims absolute outcomes, especially when the domain involves measurement error, incomplete data, or changing conditions. The presence of an extreme word does not automatically make an option wrong, but it should trigger a quick check for whether the STEM truly supports that level of certainty. When that check becomes a habit, it removes a surprising number of tempting but fragile options. Math handling benefits from a two-stage mindset that begins with estimation and then moves to computation only when needed. Estimation provides an order of magnitude and a rough expectation, which makes it easier to detect arithmetic mistakes or answer options that are wildly inconsistent with the situation described. Many exam math items can be navigated by recognizing relative size, direction, or proportional change before any detailed calculation is attempted. After an estimate is formed, computation can confirm the best match among remaining options, and the estimate acts as a safety check against careless slips. This approach mirrors professional data work, where sanity checks are applied before results are trusted, because numbers that look precise can still be wrong. A pace reset every 10 minutes is a simple way to recover control when time pressure starts to distort attention. Without periodic resets, candidates often drift into two unhelpful modes, either rushing to escape discomfort or slowing down while overanalyzing details that do not change the decision. A reset is a brief moment of reorientation that checks whether the time budget is being followed and whether the two-pass method is still intact. This keeps the session from becoming a series of emotional reactions to individual questions, which is where pacing tends to collapse. When resets are practiced ahead of time, they feel natural, and they reduce the chance that a single tough question sets the tone for the next several minutes. Anxiety control works best when it is treated as a small physical adjustment rather than a big mental battle. Brief breathing and posture checks can shift the body out of a stress posture that narrows attention and makes reading feel harder than it should. Slow breathing signals the nervous system that the situation is manageable, and posture changes can reduce the sense of being trapped in the screen or the clock. These tiny interventions are not about pretending the exam is easy, but about keeping the mind in a state where reasoning remains available. When anxiety rises, the first symptom is often a drop in comprehension, and the second symptom is impulsive answering, so calming the body protects both accuracy and timing. Returning to flagged items with fresh attention often changes how they feel because the mind is no longer carrying the frustration of being stuck. Items that seemed confusing earlier can become clearer after other questions have warmed up related concepts, especially when the exam covers connected skills that echo across domains. Fresh attention also means the time remaining is known, so decisions can be made with a realistic view of what each item deserves. In many cases, the best outcome is not a perfect solution, but a better choice than the one made under stress, using elimination and constraint checking to guide selection. This is where the two-pass approach pays off, because flagged items receive focused attention only after the main points have been secured. A closing scan is the final protection against careless errors, which are some of the most painful points to lose because they do not reflect true understanding. Careless errors often come from misreading a single word, overlooking a constraint, selecting an option that answers a different question, or confusing similar terms when tired. A scan is not a full reread of everything, but a targeted check for mismatches between the STEM's request and the selected response, especially on items that were answered quickly. This mirrors quality assurance in data work, where a brief review catches mistakes that are invisible during initial execution. When the scan is treated as a normal part of performance, it feels like professionalism rather than second-guessing. To conclude, the core time rules are simple enough to rehearse, but powerful enough to protect a score when the clock and stress are doing their best to interfere. Scaled scoring can feel opaque, so the safer strategy is consistent performance across the whole set of items, supported by a time budget and a two-pass approach that secures easy points first. Elimination, caution around extreme words, estimation before computation, periodic pace resets, and small physical anxiety controls all support steadier reasoning under exam conditions. Flagged items can be revisited with fresh attention, and a closing scan catches avoidable mistakes that have nothing to do with capability. A practical next step for this week is to rehearse these timing behaviors during practice so they become automatic, because automatic behaviors tend to hold up best when pressure is high. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.